Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, April 13th at 7 p.m. Tonight we're in committees and we do have three guests who will be joining us. David Riggs, who's the Director of Development and Code Enforcement. Jesse Schmitzer, who is the Mobility Manager for Athens County. And then Robert Hetty will be joining us later also, he is the Director of Public Works. And before we get started with the first item on Committee of the Whole, the mayor has requested a few minutes to discuss an important issue with us that will be here soon in the Athens community and how we're going to be dealing with move out during the COVID-19 epidemic.
Unmuted. Thank you, President Isley. Yeah, I'll be brief. A conversation that's been going on for quite some time, when I say that for roughly 2 weeks, is the off-campus student move out, which most leases in the city of Athens run anywhere, in between May 1 to May 10th, maybe a little bit longer, depending on the contract that was agreed upon with the landlord and their tenants. The concern that I have is the number of students who will be moving out during that time frame, which will also be at a period where we could be near or at or slightly beyond the peak of COVID-19. Again, the models keep changing from time to time. I've been in communication with my contacts to reach out to the governor's office, as well as the director for the Ohio Department of Health, Amy Acton. But also with President Nellis here in the city of Athens. I've also been talking with my counterparts across the state, the city manager of Oxford, the city manager or the mayor of Bowling Green, as well as the mayor of Kent, to gather any intel that I could as to planning that has taken place. Interestingly, they hadn't been planning or just, it wasn't something that had occurred to them. It's certainly been something heavy on my mind. So I'm hoping that said, and during that time frame between basically the last couple days in April through May 10th, something I would certainly encourage people who are viewing, certainly encourage our citizens, everyone in our community, and that would be to make sure that you have all the food stocks and other necessities that you might need in the early in the last week in April, and would strongly encourage people to, even though we've been doing a good job of staying in place, staying home, I would encourage people to stay home even more so, step it up a little bit more, and only go out for the bare necessities that you have to have in order to help to keep this curve flat, as opposed to it increasing because of the influx of people. Typically when we have move out weekends, we not only see the individuals, the renters coming back, but we see them coming with others to help them. And if you think about it, they're coming from all across the state and border states as well. So I just want to throw that out there and hope that people think about that and think about making sure that you have everything that you need. And kind of weather through this until we get beyond that off-campus move out. OU student campus, the residence halls, they were cleared out some time ago and have minimal people staying in them that were authorized to stay. But this is for the off-campus students who live in the high-density student neighborhoods and in the larger multi-unit apartment complexes. That said, remember, keep washing your hands, physical distance yourself, and if you're not feeling well, contact your primary care provider. Thank you, President Isley.
Thanks. What we'll do now is move on to the second item for Committee of the Whole, which is the solid waste and recycling and the contract and rates. And many of you have, I'm sure all of you have seen the documents that David Riggs prepared, and he's willing to walk us through the PowerPoint document. And I'm going to turn over the lead for the discussion on this to Councilmember Sam Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. In the early fall of 2019, the city administration convened a refuse and recycling task force in order to adequately prepare for the bidding process and what we will hear in a few minutes from Mr. Riggs. That task force included Kathleen Sullivan, who was an invaluable member, as well as Andrew Ladd and initially Ron Lucas, until he moved over to direct the Human Resources Department, and Mr. Riggs took over. And we continued to meet in the spring to talk about the bid process, and eventually had what I felt was a successful bid process. And we are now at the point of being able to make recommendations, or the city administration to make recommendations to council about our way forward. As many of you may have remembered, we were asked to explore adding composting to the city services. We felt that as our community went forward and as we identified the values of our community and listened to many constituents who had participated in the pilot program, some of whom had decided at a rather high monthly rate to stay with the composting program. We felt that adding that third stream with refuse and recycling to the city services is going to make our city stronger, and certainly will adhere to the sustainability plan that the city has committed to. So we have Mr. Riggs, David Riggs, has put together a presentation, and I will turn it over to him to provide the details of what the city administration is recommending for the new contract. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Councilmember Crowell. Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can, I'm not really good at this, but let's see if I can go to our PowerPoint presentation here. So what we have, and I think everybody has had a chance to take a look at this presentation, that the information that I sent. There's a lot of numbers here, so I thought maybe we could go through it this evening and talk about the whole setup, and then maybe could provide us with some staff with some direction on which way council would like to go. So we opened bids the early part of March for solid waste. There were 2 bidders that were submitted, and those were Athens Hocking Recycling and Rumpke. And the apparent low bidder, best bidder, was Athens Hocking Recycling and Refuse. That bid amount from 2019 to 2020 increased significantly. We also had an increase in July of 19 that caused us to have the fees that we collect from the solid waste fund don't support the new costs we have with a revised contract that will come up in July of 2020. So if in order to make the solid waste fund self-supporting, we're going to have to look at increasing some of the current fees that we have for solid waste. And so the 760, the solid waste fund, actually gets revenue from multiple sources. We get it primarily from residential solid waste and recycling fees, and from mixed use commercial and dumpster fees. But we also have some variable fees that we get money back from the extra bags and special hauls that the residents use. We also have a solid waste fee and we get some revenue back from trash tickets. What I did was the staff looked at a 3-year period to try to find out where we were with our revenue, and and the current rates that we're using for our residents. So currently, the residents that use one container, which is about a 35-gallon container, or charged $10. That includes both solid waste and recycling for one container. For 2 containers, it jumps up to $15.50. 3 containers to $16.50, as you can see, and on up. This actually helps us. We want residents to use less, to provide less solid waste. So we're trying to give our residents a discount or pay less if you produce less solid waste. If you produce more solid waste, then you're going to be charged a little bit more. So that is the current rates, and then we have 300 accounts that people are using for composting. That was that trial composting program, and it netted a revenue of just a little over $6,000. We also have commercial revenue accounts, and we actually there's a whole lot of these. There are 14 commercial rate codes that 76 accounts use. There are 69 different types of dumpster rate codes with 86 different accounts. 27 mixed use rate codes, and this would be like for apartments and that kind of stuff, where you have a little bit of commercial and a little bit of residential combined, and there are 340 of those accounts. And so what we did was we kind of averaged out what those, rather than try to give you each one of those details, we averaged out between 2016 and 2018, 3-year average of what the income was coming in to the utilities billing, and it turns out to be just a little over $513,000. 513,000 is the amount of income that we get from that. There's also variable costs or variable extra bags, and again, we averaged this out over a 2016 to 2018 3-year period. We average about 5,500 extra bags that we charge our residents for, and 4,200 cubic yards on average per year of special hauls. This is mattresses and heavy big couches and chairs and other types of furniture. So this is a total of the variable revenue that we get, 71,000, and then other revenue, as I said, the solid waste fees, we have just a little over 100,000. And our trash tickets, although they've been going down from year to year, still run about 82,000. So total other revenue, 183,578. And so combining all those together, we have residential revenue, commercial revenue, variable revenue, and then the other revenue, which was the solid waste fees and the trash tickets. The total income coming into our 760 account is $1,387,800, and this is an average. It changes a little bit from year to year. So that's what we are generating in revenue for this account. And then we wanted to start talking about the solid waste contract costs. Did anybody have any questions up to this point? A lot of numbers. Okay, so this would be the new 2020 bid for solid waste, and we have this is Athens Hocking Recycling. Their cost for solid waste and recycling has bumped up to $1,543,692. The 2 lines underneath are their estimates, but we end up with a total cost or fee of $1,616,000 for this new contract. In addition, the other money that comes out of the solid waste fund, we have some salaries. The utilities billing, their salaries come from this. I think the deputy safety service director, some of his salary comes out of this, and a couple other places. All my solid waste officers, their salaries come out of here. Supplies would be tickets, incidentals for the office, and then equipment. We have about, I think it's about 50,000 a year for big bellies that we're still going to have to spend. $45,800 for the big bellies. And I also included in here an option for residential solid waste containers. So that's different. This would unify all of the solid waste containers rather than people having their own individual solid waste containers. Rumpke would supply those and would maintain those. So that's included in here. So the total costs would be this, which is the contract costs plus the other fees, costs associated with that. So taking that information together, you've got your total revenue for the fund, your total costs for the fund. We're ending up, we think, with a shortfall of about $600,000. And so we need to find a way to try to balance that to make it more net neutral. And so I've got a couple of options that I wanted to send by you guys to give me your opinion on. Option number one, it would be a break-even balance. So this would be trying to get the fund down to zero at the end of every year or close to it. And I broke that up into, because we have an option for composting with and without composting. Then option number two would be, let's just try to go 5% above our break even with and without composting. And an option three would be to fund, to have this fund produce 10% above the break even with and without composting. So let's go through those numbers real quick. If we tried to, so what I tried to do is come up with a proposed rates for a break even fund. And as you can see, these the new numbers are, you can round those up or down, so you can make this $12.75 or $13. But I was just trying to get it to get to close to a net zero. And so by doing this, option number one, break even, we would have an increase of $2.69 for one container. The majority of the accounts are two containers. As you can see, we've got 2,362 accounts. That rate would jump up from $15.50 to $23.44 for an increase of $7.94. And you can see as we go up, those increases go up as well. And because we have so many commercial codes, we're going to just increase those by 56%, rather than try to give you each individual one. We're just going to average those over the increase to 56%. We also want to increase the extra bags, the charge for extra bags from $3, which is what it currently is, to $5, and the special hauls would go to from $12 a cubic yard to $50 or $15 a cubic yard. So if we did these increases, we would end up with almost a net zero. I got plus $511 here. And again, these are estimates, so it could vary from year to year depending on how many extra bags we get, how many trash tickets are done, and some other stuff. So this is kind of a variable cost, but I'm trying to get it to close to a break even. So in order to get to break even, we would have to have these increases in our existing residential rates and a 56% increase in all of our commercial rates in order to get to a net near zero balance for our fund without composting. If you wanted to do composting, we included this as an option, and we assumed that we'd have about 1,500 accounts that would actually use the would use the service. And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to break out that total cost across all of the residential accounts, all these 3,500 accounts. And if you do that, this $139,000 averages out to be about $3.29 per residential account per month. So the total increase then is over here. For one container, your increase would be from $10 to $15.98, or a $5.98 increase. Two containers, again, this is a majority of the folks, would see an $11.23 increase, would go to $26.73, and so on. I will say at this right here that, if you look at some of the other communities that provide solid waste and recycling, they're going to be in this range, in the $20 to $25 a month range. So it's not something that other communities it's not outside what other communities are charging their residents. So that's the option number one. That's a break even on this fund. Sorry, there are a lot of numbers here. So if you have any questions, please let me know. If we wanted to jump up to a 5% above break even, we would have these increases. You'd go for one container from $10 a month to $13.47, which is $3.47 increase. Two containers would jump up to increase by $9.36, and all the commercial rates would increase by 66%. Extra bags, again, going from $3 to $5. Special hauls from $12 a yard to $15 a yard. This would give us a gain in the account on average of just a little over $100,000, $104,891, which is about a 5% increase every year. This would account for the cost of living increases, or any increases in costs as they go up throughout the years. This is going to be a 3-year contract for Athens Hocking, with options to renew afterwards. So this would make us solvent for at least for the next 3 years. So that's option without composting. If we wanted to do composting at 5% above break even, you can see these increases here. And then I also did another option, which is a 10% above break even, which would change our rates to, for instance, a one container would go from $10 to $4.17 increase. The extra bags would go from $3 to $5, special hauls from $12 to $15, and commercial rates would need to increase by 74% to match what we're doing over here. So that would give us a 10% increase would be about $200,000 annual gain in the fund. And then with composting, your rates would go for one container would go from $10 to $17.46. Two containers would go from $15.50 to $29.45, $13.95 increase, and on as you see. So those are our 3 options that I can give you lots more options if you want. We can do this without without having the dollars and cents here. We can average this out. We also have some suggestions, maybe if you could look at, because these rates are going to increase. We may want to recommend a discount to senior citizens age 65 or older. This could actually be managed through the utility billing office, and could help out some of the people that are on fixed income. We also would recommend, the franchise areas are working really well, but if we had some additional incentives to put more containers in the downtown area, I think that would even help even more. And so I would ask that maybe you consider a 20% discount for owners that allow central sites in the downtown area. And then we would take responsibility to repair those private areas that are damaged by the refuse trucks using private property. You probably wouldn't account for very much, but at least we could offer to do that. We could actually do a lot of that in-house with our public works staff. And then another recommendation would be that the change includes an annual 2% increase in order to keep up with the cost of living increases. So that's the information that I have. I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, David. I want to point out, having been involved in this process since the fall and looking at a lot of this very closely with the other members of the task force committee, that we talked a lot about the composting pilot and talking about what it might cost to add composting services across the city. And as I mentioned in the introduction, a number of residents, approximately 100 residents, are continuing their composting services today at the rate of, I believe, a little under $20 a month. As we see these necessary rates across the board, refuse recycling increasing, I want to make sure that the community understands that if we do add composting to our city services, these increases are not just because of the composting. The increases are necessary because of costs that have gone up across the board. We know, many of us know what has happened to the recycling industry. Debbie Walker helped me look at some of our past rates. We haven't increased our rates since 2010. So it has been a decade since we've had any rate increases. I think that the city of Athens, being the first city to have curbside recycling, that we can continue to be a leader in Ohio and offer composting services. This is my personal recommendation. I also believe that some of the discounts that we discussed and that David presented tonight should be good things for us to talk about as city council. And I think that we're able to absorb some of those discounts if we do target the 5% over break even. If we really just try to break even, then it makes it much more difficult to get some of those costs to work out if we are incentivizing people or having other programs. If we're incentivizing people to throw away less and we have a lot of people move from a 2 container to a 1 container, that's going to change the overall numbers. And I really would hope that people move to throwing away less. That is our goal. Is to have more recycling and more food waste collection and less solid waste going to the landfill. The last point I'll make is that I understand, just like recycling 30 years ago was a relatively new thing and people weren't quite sure why we would do it. Composting, a lot of people don't understand either, that it's not just sort of keeping the odorous material out of your trash can. It is that organic material in the landfills that, in the absence of oxygen, encourages methane-producing bacteria to thrive, and that's where a lot of greenhouse gases are produced in our landfills that do have organic matter in them, and that is, the food waste still has value, and we can extract that value if we are able to separate it and we have a good service through our provider. We can create that circular economy that many of us really hope to support in this community. And so that's my personal recommendation, is the 5% over break even with the composting services. And I'm interested in what the rest of the council thinks. Yes, Arian? Member Smedley?
Just a couple things. First of all, I appreciate the presentation. It was very well organized, easy to follow, and I've learned a lot, so I appreciate that. The proposals that have us bringing in some surplus, what sort of things would we be spending those surplus dollars on? And Member Crowell mentioned the possibility of using some of that to subsidize some households, and so that partially answers that question. If there are other ways you anticipate using those funds, I'd be interested in hearing that. And then also, would we be open to subsidizing any individual who has a fixed income, not just senior citizens? In thinking specifically of people with disabilities. And I'm going to go back on mute, so thank you.
David, do you want to take that on? I can just answer Member Smedley that, and the mayor and Mr. Reisner and President Isley can speak to this perhaps, is that, for example, our very large blue recycling containers came out of, I believe, Mayor, if this is correct, the funds that were in 760 that were sort of not extra, but were there because they were collected, and we can, so I think things like that can be used for those funds. But David, did you have any other information on what those funds could be used for?
Sure. So whenever you try to get a fund to zero balance, you can sometimes end up in the red and sometimes end up in the black. So if you really try to stay on that razor's edge, there could be times where you'd have to supplement the solid waste, the 760 fund from the general fund, from your regular taxes. And that means you're going to be pulling income away from some other essential services that the city provides. So it's nice to have a little bit of a buffer, so you don't need to worry about doing that. Secondly, yeah, if you have a small buffer, and we're not talking about a very large amount here, at a 5% above break even, I think we were going to be just over, on average, just over $100,000 in the black. But if as we've seen the trash, for instance, our trash tickets, we want the citizens to do a good job with their trash collection, and we want to be able to write less tickets. So we would like to see the income from trash tickets go down, but then we also have to account for that. So that gives us a little bit of a buffer, a little bit of a float to be able to do that. And then if you had a little bit more money in that fund, you could have other options to do. As Councilmember Crowell indicated, we did have an opportunity to come up with some of those blue containers because we had some funds in the black in this fund, and you'd be able to do that with if you had any of the extra fund available in there. And again, these numbers are fairly small. You know, $100,000 a year sounds like a lot, but as far as a financial budget for a community, it's not a real large amount.
Member Felter?
Yes. So in general, I think that these increases sound fairly reasonable because we haven't increased the prices in 10 years. And I'm really happy that we will be supporting the Athens Hocking Recycling Center. And I agree with Member Crowell that it's wonderful to expand the curbside composting program all over town for anyone who wants to do that. I'm one of the few people who are still doing that because I think it's really great to help the environment. But yes, thank you, Member Crowell. So just one little thing. Even though I think this is pretty reasonable, and I think we should emphasize that the prices haven't gone up for 10 years, this is a really tough time for people right now. So many people have lost their jobs. Our businesses are losing lots of money. People may not like this. Some people are probably having a hard time even paying their rents. And I'm just really worried that so many people are poor right now. So I think we have to do this. But one thing, just one suggestion, my own 2 cents, is if we raise these fees so much, and then we say, oh, by the way, you're going to have to get a different trash can, that may just annoy a lot of people. I know, and I say that because I remember when we all had to get the same recycling bins, and so many of my friends just went off about that. I couldn't believe how annoyed people were. Really calm, measured people just got very, very angry. And I know I have a very narrow 1950s garage with just room for my car and room to squeeze by sideways. I had to rearrange my whole garage to fit that in there. I don't have room for 2 of those. And so I don't know if you're talking about a similar bin, but I guess I would be suggesting for your consideration that we at least make the idea of getting a new bin optional and not force people to do it, because that might take some people's annoyance from the increase to actual anger, because that's what I saw last time, even though it doesn't seem that important. But I'm for not annoying people if we don't have to.
Director Riggs, do you want to respond to that, or?
Sure. Yeah, I can absolutely do that. If you guys would like to see these numbers again without the containers. It would save a little bit of money, and it's an option. It's entirely up to you all to try to make a decision on what you want to do. So let me give you some revised numbers on that without the containers, and I can get that to you fairly shortly.
Yeah, and before I turn it over to President Isley, I just want to respond to Member Clodfelter that I absolutely agree with you about the difficulties of these current times. You know, and as you know, and as you expressed, unfortunately, our refuse is going to still have to be, you know, picked up come July 1st and we don't have a contract. So we know that the costs are already going up. They're going to have to be raised in order for those services, which is an important public health service as well. But I appreciate your thinking about how maybe not to include all the costs with maybe the extra bins. That's an excellent point. I think President Isley had her hand up. President Isley?
Just to make a comment from having watched council for years, and yes, I do remember people being upset by the blue bins, but in regards to standard trash can sizes, there has consistently been a comment, you know, I may put out, you know, in one size bin, you know, a 30-gallon trash bin, but then there are others who are using much larger bins, and that just to make it equitable for everybody, I think has been the argument. Mr. Riggs, if I'm remembering correctly, is the grand total cost $25,000 for the standardized bins?
Yeah, that's the one-time fee, and then there's also an additional charge that AHRC wants to instill to do the maintenance on them. So I'll give you, like I said, I'll give you those prices with and without the recycled bins.
Sure. So, and I was just, I hear the comments and I hear that. I'm just saying, out of the total, you know, total contract costs that we're talking about of, you know, millions of dollars, the $3.6 million that, I don't know, it doesn't seem like as much, but you're right. It will be, how do we convey that? So thank you.
I think Member Grace was next. I'm going to get you, Member Fall. Hold on. Member Grace?
Thank you, Member Crowell. Buffer and including the composting for everyone. I would really like to see us go in that direction. And I guess I have a question and one additional comment. Would the increased fees go into place July 1? And is there, just because of concern with current economic situations for many of our residents and businesses, is there any wiggle room, any way that we could just implement the fees a bit later, anticipating that 5% cushion basically being used up immediately, like for the first half year or something, by implementing the fees a bit later, just to give people time to hopefully get back on their feet, hopefully get our students back to town and businesses back to normal operations. So I don't know if there's any wiggle room with that, but I would also like to support Member Smedley's comment about considering a discount for individuals who are maybe on a disability as their only source of income. And I don't know exactly how that would be evaluated, but that option. And then as far as the universal containers, I think that's a really good thing if they're good quality, heavy duty with attached lids, because for a lot of rental property areas, getting really good quality containers at a rental unit is a significant cost, and the lids always disappear or they get run over, and so it ends up being a significant problem in close-in communities with a lot of containers. And so I think even though there is an adjustment period, and I understand Member Clodfelter's comments, and I have neighbors who have retained their orange containers. And I think we could sort of do that on an individual basis. Like if someone just doesn't have room in their garage and doesn't need the larger universal container, maybe a few people would keep their current container. But I think having a universal container that's a little heavier duty than a lot of residential homes end up with would actually be beneficial long term. I think that's all. Thank you, Member Crowell.
Thank you, Member Grace. I know that we have Member Fall and Member Smedley, but I would like either the mayor or Director Riggs to comment on the possibility of sort of defer. I'm not sure how that would work billing wise in terms of this time we're in and the money crunch that we're under.
Let me share one of the things we certainly can look into, Councilmember Crowell, is, you know, the amount of money that we have in that fund line now, or what it will look like more importantly in as we get into July. Because as you'd mentioned earlier, you know, we had been subsidizing that for quite some time. I believe I was on council when we were subsidizing our HRC costs with refuge recycling. We certainly were doing it with the composting program, subsidizing there as well. We can go back, David, you and I can look at those numbers to see whether there could be a level of subsidy with the reserves that we have to get us, you know, possibly. I mean, we'll look to see what we have, but to see how far we can stretch that. I'm hearing everything that's being said, and I agree that if there is a way that we can kind of get ourselves through, you know, the next 4, 5, 6 months, and then go into the higher percentage. I would also like to add really quick, and this has been touched on, and I really appreciate this being mentioned, is the fact that the rates haven't changed since 2010. You know, at a bare minimum, I believe there should have been a 2% cost of living increase every year across then, because if you do that math and look to see, we would be there already in terms of this particular rate increase. I think that is important as you guys are having this conversation, that we look at something that at least matches cost of living increases. So that was a kind of a long answer to your question, Sam.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Director Riggs, did you want to add anything there, or?
Yeah, if I could just, thank you. If I could just add that I absolutely get that this is a bad time to be doing this. And I had some conversations with Athens Hawking Recycling about maybe not doing the containers this year, maybe doing them a year later or something. So that remains an option for us as well. If we think this is just a bad time to be, containers are important, it makes a lot of sense, but we don't want to do it right now, we can do that in year 2 or year 3 in the contract.
Thank you. Member Fall.
Thank you. I like that the pricing structure is slanted towards people who use less containers. I think that's a very important thing to retain in this process. We do have an ordinance that updated other language in our code about having lids on garbage cans, because that is a really big health problem if you have your garbage all over every place. So the new garbage cans would probably help with that. I think that the ordinance has been not really looked at as very, you know, people put their garbage cans with zip ties to the lid to the garbage can. And I think that in this day and age, when you drive around the whole of town, if we can get our garbage within all the containers, that's really important, because when you look at plastic pollution, one of the big things is that it's not contained within the garbage system. And so I think that we need to do that, because a lot of the garbage that we see laying around, a lot of the plastic garbage is coming out from that. So I want to continue on that discussion about having robust lidded containers. A lot of these are going to be bought by rental units, which would be good because a lot of them have a difficulty in containing their garbage. Thank you.
Okay, I know I said Member Smedley, but Member Katsas hasn't spoken yet, so let's give Member Katsas a chance.
Thanks. I was thinking maybe you didn't see my hand.
Yeah, I could see.
So and Director Riggs, thank you for chiming in.
Member Katsas, we lost you if you can hear us. You are officially frozen on my screen. Let's go to Member Smedley and see if Member Katsas can figure out his issues.
Thank you. I just wanted to second what was suggested earlier by Member Grace of seeing if there's a possibility of postponing the increase. And I appreciate the mayor chiming in on that and being open to exploring that as an option. Because I understand if we had considered the cost of living increase 10 years ago, we would be at where we're trying to get now. But we also are, facing a really unique time. And if there's a way that we can help people out, that would be great. So I appreciate you looking into that, Mayor.
Okay, great. Now, Member Reisner.
My question is a little different. Going back to the very beginning, how does Athens Hawking Recycling justify their increase like this? Maybe I'm a little confused, but it seems to me that a major part of their cost would be the tipping fee. And the tipping fee is, I believe, based upon the cubic yardage of trash that's being put in the landfill. Well, if Athens, which I believe has been doing a pretty good job of reducing the amount of trash, the total amount of cubic yardage that's going in, our fees should be going down. Why are they going up? That's my question.
Mayor Patterson, you want to take that one?
Well, no, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to defer to David on this. But one of the things I think that would be helpful would be for David to explain with the two bids that did come forward, the difference between those two in terms of the amount of the bid. David?
Sure. So the amount of bid, the difference between the two bids, they were actually fairly close. They were within 10% of each other. That's really good when you're actually bidding a contract like this for those two to come in as close as they did. That tells us that we think those prices are fairly reasonable, that there isn't any imbalance between two very respectable and well-known bidders. Councilmember Risner, I think I could, and I asked the same question to Athens Hawking Recycling, why the costs are going up. And what was explained to me was that historically, the recycling that we have been doing such a good job of here in the city of Athens has helped to defer or offset the costs of the solid waste. So that as you're recycling, you're actually creating the contractor's creating an income, and so he can reduce his total fees to us. So he's making a profit, and the city's seeing some savings associated with that. What we've seen over the last year or two is that the value of the material, the recycling material, it's not paying for itself anymore. So we have seen historically where we were getting some benefit from the funds for recycling. We're not seeing that anymore. So we're having to pay for the solid waste tipping fees, as you said, plus there's really not much in the way of income the contractor is receiving from the recyclables like they have in the past. And that's why you see the price going up, I believe.
No, that didn't really answer my question. Are the tipping fees increasing?
They are, but not as much as the contract has increased. And we think that the reason the contract has increased is because that the value of the recycling has gone down, and so the contractor can still, not lose money. He's having to raise the total costs.
Well, I'm sorry to belabor this point, but in terms of the tipping fee, the landfill is charging a tipping fee, correct? I don't know what it is, but it's a fixed amount.
Yes.
Is that fixed amount set in the contract, or is
No? No,
okay,
it's
are they taking the tipping fee and then saying, okay, I'm going to take the tipping fee as a basis, now I'm going to add an extra 10, 20, 30% to that? Is that what's happening?
That would be a great question for the contractor. I think what the contractor is trying to do is, they're a not-for-profit company, so they're not trying to make a killing on this. They're trying to break even with the and pay their guys a reasonable amount of money, and still continue to do their recycling and solid waste. So I think what's going on is that in order for them to continue to do what they're doing, since they're not making money on the recycling end of it, they're having to increase the total charge for the program.
Well,
Sorry, Member Reisner, you want to go?
no, I'm beat.
Okay, I may come back to that, but I want to hear first from Member Clodfelder.
Thank you. I was wondering the same thing as Member Reisner today, more or less. I was curious about the increase. And so in the interest of full disclosure, I called the executive director of the Athens Hockey Recycling Center, who I know because I will say I'm a former board member of that. And he said, in addition to just the tremendous impact of the bottoming out practically of the recycling prices, which means that market hasn't recovered. They're really not getting much money at all from the recycled materials. And that really does change the dynamics. But there are two specific things going on that are affecting the cost right now. One is, and they're kind of, this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but to answer your question, one is that the bonding agent that bonds the Athens Hockey and Recycling Center is insisting that rather than paying their bond year by year, they have to pay it all up front. And they've raised it. And so that's a factor for year one. Is they're going to have this much larger payment to a third party that has to be paid in order for them to accept and complete the contract. The other thing, and I just lost my train of thought. The other thing, there was that. Oh, and yes, apparently the contract language mandates that they run a single axle truck uptown. And that means that they're going to have to send an additional truck and an additional crew to take care of the uptown. And that is going to have a number of associated costs on a daily basis. That right there raises the costs. I don't know exactly how much, but it's a significant amount of money to comply with that requirement of the contract. And that's all I was going to add.
That contract, actually, that single axle has been in the contract for several years. I'm not sure that that's been enforced, but that is something that's been in the contract, and it may just got left out for the pricing that occurred in before 2019. We did see in 2019, like I said, I think if you look at that presentation, there was almost a 38% increase from the previous contract to the 2019 contract that we're doing right now. So the contract from that time to the 2020, that's increased, but not near as much as that did in the 2019 contract.
And I also wanted to say, and Director Riggs can speak to this specifically, as we tried to look or at least evaluate the bids in terms of their sustainability impact and what benefits that they bring to the city in terms of people, planet, and economic prosperity. We did look at the sort of social impact of the wages that the sanitation, refuse and recycling workers were making. And so there was, I think for the first time, Director Riggs,
That's correct.
line of at least $14 per hour, which would also perhaps mean that the labor, that we mandated that the labor costs go up.
Yes, that's correct, Councilmember Crowell. We looked at that. We wanted to make sure that anybody that was bidding on this contract were paying reasonable wages. And there's a couple ways to do that. We went back and looked at the prevailing wage rates for this type of work, the difference between union and non-union rates. And I had a conversation with both of the bidders on what they thought was a reasonable and fair rate. Took that information, and I think what we asked for was a minimum of $15 an hour that all their solid waste collectors would be paid, and that is in the contract, and that is new this year.
Okay, thank you. I see that Member Katsas has rejoined us. I'm going to turn it over to him in just a second for his comments. I also wanted to say, though, that just to be clear, we did receive the 2 bids. Athens Talking Recycling Center was the lower of the 2 bids, although as Director Riggs said, they were very close. I actually haven't seen all of the evaluations, but at least in my evaluation process, they were the better of the 2 bids, as well as, at least in being completely informative to all of the questions and the areas of the bid that were asked of them to provide information for. Member Katsas, did you want to join the conversation?
Yes, thank you. And so I wanted to just ask for clarification. It's the bid from ARHC is 1.6 million for 3 years. There's no increase over those 3 years.
That's correct. There's no increase. We asked them to maintain that at a continuous annual cost for 3 years. We did look at maybe having a base cost and then an increase, as the mayor was talking about, just like we'd have an increase of 2% as a cost of living for the fees. I've done that before in other contracts where you have an extended contract date, contract length. You don't know what's going to happen with the cost of fuel or the cost of living. So you give the contractor a little bit of incentive to give us a better price by telling him we'll give you a 2% increase every year for the next 3 years in this contract. I did not do that in this contract, but we did talk about it.
Okay. And then the only other thing, and I know that we started to touch on this a little bit, does anybody know what the garbage fund, what that currently sits at?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. We'll find out
that
this week, I'm sure. Okay,
we can
great.
get you
Thank
that
you.
information, Councilmember Katsas.
Okay. All right.
Is there anyone else that wanted, that's it for Member Katsas. Anyone else anything to add? Okay, President Isley, thank you.
And Councilmember Katsas, that was timely because now we're up with Transportation Committee and discussion of the local match for the Mobility Manager Program.
Yes, President Isley, thank you. And yeah, as we work through some of these finer details with this new technology and trying to work on it, I'm glad that we're able to loop in different people in order to join the conversation. And so Jesse Schmitzer gets to join us this evening. I saw that Jesse did loop everybody in on council about this conversation. So this is the annual ask of $7,500 to help in a partnership to pay for the mobile mobility manager for the county. And she did list some of the successes, but I thought it would be even better for Jesse to be present to kind of talk about what the current status is of transportation now that we're kind of in a different phase right now. So Jesse, thank you so much for chiming in this evening, and you have the floor.
Okay, thanks, Pete. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on your agenda tonight. Yeah, so with mobility management and transportation right now, just a couple updates from last year that were successes of the program. So the big one, everybody knows Line 7 was a huge success. We were able to not only get that running with local funds completely, but to get it funded completely through the state of Ohio for this entire year, which is awesome. And they're really excited about the partnerships we were able to get together to collaborate, and that we were able to fund it completely locally. So that line's still going strong. We were able to do that. And then last year, another big success was, with the mobility management program, I'm always looking for new ways to kind of take the funding burdens off of local entities, such as the county or the city, or kind of figure out different ways that we can fund that. So one big project that we completed last year was combining Athens Public Transit and Athens On-Demand Transit under the same funding source. So what that did is it's really a more stable funding source, 5311 funds, instead of the 5310 funds. But that also allowed us to open up Athens On-Demand Transit to the general public, and add some Saturday hours on that too. So those are the two, biggest successes that we had, on top of a lot of other things last year. But in terms of right now where we are with mobility management and the importance of it, as we're all going through this really unprecedented time with COVID-19, it's the same thing, just we're doing it at a completely different level. So there's 35 mobility managers now in the state of Ohio. We're all representing different counties. The big first thing is advocating. We just got done advocating massively, working really closely with the Ohio Public Transit Association to make sure that in the CARE Act, that just the stimulus bill that just passed, public transportation was definitely included in that. We were really lucky that they listened. They did advocate, for $25 billion for transit across the country. So we're all kind of seeing the same thing. There's a huge decline in ridership. There's a lot of contracts that are on hold, meaning that local funding that we typically get to fund the system isn't really there right now. So this is a great way to make sure that we have that funding there when this kind of hopefully slowly gets better. We'll still be there operating and have those funds to do that and cover the cost of a lot of things. So advocating is a huge thing for mobility management right now. We get together once a week with everybody in the state of Ohio, with our ODOT representative for mobility management, give updates of what we're doing in the community. So that's been really important. The other big thing right now is collaborating. So because we're under a state of emergency, transportation providers can use these vehicles for things they normally wouldn't be able to do. So a really great collaboration that I'm working with right now is with Athens On-Demand Transit, United Seniors, and the Athens Village, where the Athens Village and United Senior have, volunteers go to grocery stores, get food for seniors, drop it off down at the Athens Village office at AceNet, and Athens On-Demand Transit can use the vehicles to pick up those groceries and drop them off directly to people's homes. And that's completely free of charge. So that's a really great collaboration that we're doing right now. So we're not having as many riders, which is great because we don't want people to be that close in proximity if they don't need to be. But we're, working on ways to use the vehicles in ways that can really help the community right now. And other things, we're working with United Seniors and using their vehicles to take people out of county. RSVP is not operating right now. Green Cab is not really operating right now, but people still need to get up to these hospital appointments in Columbus. So we're working with them to kind of keep that going. So as of right now, the public transportation is still operating. Some hours have been cut and we're only allowing a certain number of people in the vehicles. All fares are free right now for people. So we're going to keep trying to operate as long as we can, as long as we feel that it's safe, and trying to make sure our drivers are safe and cleaning the buses. So for mobility management, it's really important for us to try to keep it going, especially throughout the year. So this is my ask that I do every year. I know I'm coming to you a little later than usual. ODOT changed their application date once again. I never know what day it is because they change it every year. But so this is the ask for the usual $7,500 to fund for this year for 2020 as the matching fund.
Okay, Jesse, thank you so much. And it looks like we have a couple questions. Member Fall, good. Just thumbs up. Okay.
All right, awesome. Okay, I'll take it.
Member Smedley.
No question, but just a comment. Just wanted to commend you guys for doing such a great job responding the way you have, in just managing all of that and the free fares. And that's just a really huge public service that you're doing, and just want to extend my appreciation.
Awesome, thank you.
Member Claude Felter.
Yeah, I would like to second Member Smedley on that. I think the fact that you've made the fares free must be greatly appreciated by a lot of people right now. I love the safety precautions you've taken by limiting the number of people who can get on. And I love it that you're so passionate about keeping it going. I think it's going to take advocates like you to make sure that public transportation continues to get funding. And congratulations on your success in this latest bill. That's getting 25 billion sounds fantastic. I did have one little specific, or two little specific questions. One, has there been any, or what kind of feedback have you gotten about the fact that only 5 people can get on each bus? Do you ever have people getting stranded and having to wait an hour? And secondly, I've heard that in New York City, they're only allowing people to enter their public buses from the rear door to keep the drivers safer. And I wondered if that had been considered here.
Yeah, sure. So most of the buses that we're operating right now are the smaller buses, just with one door on them. If we were using the longer bus, which we typically do for, for example, the courtyard apartment, line that we run, we would be doing that, but we're not operating that right now. So unfortunately, that's not an option with the smaller buses,
Okay.
but that's what we would be doing if we had the longer buses. And then for your first question with the 5 people on the bus, there has been, a bit of feedback. People want to sit together. There's people that are riding together and they just, want to hang out together. So we're really working with the drivers, to kind of have it ready, the conversation when that does happen, one, so it doesn't escalate, and two, so that people understand that this is for their own safety as well as the driver's safety too. So it's definitely been a learning curve for a lot of people. There have been some people that have, not been able to get on the bus because it's full, but because Athens On Demand Transit is, wide open right now, pretty much, they're not as full capacity because people aren't riding it. We're just really telling them, call them, and they'll be able to come get you. So we're lucky in that sense, but yeah, it's definitely been a learning curve for both sides.
Okay, great. Mayor Patterson, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jesse to explain how the buses are being set up to manage physical distancing between people on the buses.
Yeah, sure. So with the, to manage the 6 feet in between people, we have taped off the seats that people can't sit in. So there's no option for people to sit closer than 6 feet together. They're not able to do it. They'd have to take down caution tape. They'd have to, physically destroy some things. So yeah, there's no option for people to sit any closer than 6 feet apart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will see some legislation that will come forward up for everybody's consideration. But Jesse, thank you so much for coming in this evening, and thank you for everything that you do.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, and stay safe, everyone. Stay well.
Thank you. With that, that's the end of Transportation Committee.
Okay. Then we'll move on to City and Safety Services with Councilmember Grace chairing.
Thank you, President Isley. We just have one item this evening that we need to discuss. Our engineering and public works. They are in the process of making the very specific plans to replace a water booster station for the Kimes Reservoir. And my internet just said it was unstable. Can everyone still hear me? Okay, the Kimes Reservoir needs a new booster station. And if we can put the new booster station at a lower elevation, Robert Hetty has said that it could improve pump suction pressure and allow us to serve more areas to the south and west. So as long as we need to replace this station, it seems that we should do it in the best possible location. However, in order to evaluate that, we need to do some soil borings, and those need to be performed on land that is owned by the Kimes Convalescent Center. And they have asked that we sign an entry agreement in order to do those borings. The entry agreement was prepared by them, was sent to our law director. Law Director Eliason reviewed it, requested a few changes, and sent it back. And the representative from Kimes has approved and signed the revised entry agreement. And our engineering department has requested that we bring this up to approve his signature on this and at next council meeting. Was there anything else, Mayor Patterson?
No. No, I think you hit everything. As you mentioned, we did get a signed copy of that agreement from Richard Buckley, president at Kimes. And this is to do our due diligence with soil borings in that area to put this. We've also, just to share, to lower this and have greater access to water in that area off of the Kimes Reservoir with this in particular, we have had conversations with property owners in that area as well that were interested in possibly seeing some housing development. More to come on that in the future, hopefully, but this is all related to that. Some of you may remember Copper Beach, which was something that was being explored a long time ago. So this would really help with our water system. I'm watching Councilmember Fall doing something back there.
Way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
This would be the first step to have council authorize this so that we could do, like I said, our due diligence with the soil boring, the geotechs.
Makes sense.
If there are no other questions or concerns, then we'll see legislation next week, and I will be requesting that we suspend the rules to approve this so that they can move forward as quickly as possible.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Grace. And I didn't forget, Councilmember Crowell, that we have Finance and Personnel Committee. Sorry, slightly out of order, but yes, I know you have an item for the Stimson Avenue funding.
I do. Thank you, President Isley. Has Director Hetty been able to join us? Okay, well, it was Director Hetty's intention to join us this evening. All I can say is that that they hoped today to have the updated costs since the Stimson roadway design is final, and they were going to try to have other project costs of the Stimson project for discussion today. I don't have those costs or any information on that discussion personally. So if Director Hetty isn't able to be here and no one else has any information, I'm afraid that's all we can do.
That's all we can do. I know that I did convey the message to the government channel that he was to be invited, so he was, but something may have happened in that with this afternoon. So I'm sure we can get that update in writing from Director Hetty, and then we'll get that to all the council members immediately. So thank you. And that ends our agenda for the committees, and we'll meet next week, April 20, in regular session. And I would comment that as we publish these agendas and make them available to the public, we also do give the public an option that if they have questions or comments, we do have, there's an email on that that's listed on that agenda, and it's askquestions@ci.athens.oh.us. So the public can submit questions and participate in that way. We thank you very much for your time, and it's good to see you all. If not in person, at least virtually. Okay, good night.
Bye,
Stay
everybody.
healthy.
Good night.